Well, let's talk a little bit about your time in Vegas. I know you spent some time on Johnny Haig's famous relief band, and what was that like? And how long were you in actually living in Vegas and working as a professional?
Well, I left Buddy's band in January '68. The band was in Vegas, and at that time, Shu had already left the band, and I wanted to leave. I wanted to stay in Vegas. My brother was living there. Shu was living there. No, this is the town to live in, for the musicians. Because everybody, Herbie Phillips, Carl Fontana, you name it. It was just full of fantastic musicians lived in Vegas at that time, and I wanted to leave. So I told Buddy, I gave Buddy my notice, and then that was a beautiful thing too. Buddy said to me, he said, "Kid," he said, "I'll make sure you never work again the rest of your life." That was his line too. Well, I made more money the first night, I think, than I did on Buddy's band for the whole week. So it was, it was just his attitude. It was fantastic. You kind of have to laugh when he says things like that. A lot of people took it too serious. Well, I just laughed at all that shit inside because I don't know what a joke, It's maybe he'd have me whacked. Maybe then I wouldn't work again, but that wasn't going to happen. So anyhow, I left the band for a show at the Minsky's Follies, and that show in January '68. And I don't know if it's still that way, but in Nevada, you had to earn your card. You had to put in your time and join the union. You had to wait 6 months to get your card to work. That's the way it was. So everybody would, unless they needed you. And in this case, there was an opening in the band, and they played nothing but Buddy's charts on that. So it was like they needed me. So I left the band and went right to work at Minsky's, at the show at Minsky's Follies. So I did that, and then, when did I join Johnny Haig's band? Did I do 2 shows? Maybe I did. I think, but I did an 8 o'clock. Oh yeah, that was a 10 and a 2. Okay, yeah. That was a 10 o'clock and a 2 because it was the lounge, that show, the girly show. And then the 8 o'clock and the midnight show, I was on the relief band. That was Johnny Haig, or Haig Eschau was his name, Johnny Haig. His stage name was Johnny Haig. And the greatest thing about that gig was the fact that the band was fantastic because we played all the dark nights. So every night, we worked 6 nights a week, 7. Every hotel off night. So every night I'd go to a different hotel at 8 and midnight and play that show. And then at 10 and 2, I'd go back and do Minsky's Follies at the Thunderbird.
Must have had the best musicians since you have to
it was great.
Sight reading, everything. It
was great. It was a great band. It really was. There were fantastic musicians in Vegas. And that trumpet section was Louis Valazan. I don't know if you know who he was.
I don't.
He played with Esquivel and Tito Puente. Fantastic. There was a recording of him playing Fly the Bumblebee up in double C.
Wow.
Yeah. Ridiculous. He and Ollie Mitchell. They were the two on Tito's band when they recorded it.
Oh, okay.
But so anyhow, I was there till May of '69. So January '68 to May of '69. And Herbie Phillips, who was in the trumpet section, it was Bobby, myself, and Herbie. And Herbie would say to me every day, "Kid, did you give your notice yet?" Because he knew I wanted to move to LA. Because I did the whole summer of '67 doing a Way We Go show here in LA with Buddy's band. And that was Buddy Rich, Buddy Greco, Sarah Vaughan, and George Carlin was a kid comedian. So that I knew I wanted to move here. When I was here in '67, I met John Audino, Ray Scary, Manny Klein, Vince DeRose. I met, Ollie Mitchell was on the band for us for that summer. You name it, I met everybody here and Pete Condoli, Conte Condoli, Buddy Childers. I mean, all the people that I idolized all my life and recorded, Yuan Racy, everybody. They were here and I met them all and I said, this is where I want to be. But my coming here was leaving Buddy's band in Vegas. That was that step to here. So I was there till May of '69. Okay. And then Herbie would say, every day, did you give me a notice? I said, no, not yet. And he kept bugging me. And if it wasn't for him, I'd probably still live in Vegas. And because you get stuck there, because you do the shows, you get that check every week. It's great living. Play golf every day, play your horn every night. Great food, all these women all over the world. I mean, it was just everything about it. It was great, especially being a young man like I was. And but Herbie kept bugging me, and finally one day he said, did you give me a notice? I said, yes, I did. And that was May of '69. Then I moved here, and the rest is history.
Well, let's start on the LA portion of your career, and this is where it really gets amazing and interesting. A good friend of ours, Dave Trigg, hipped me to this last week at our show at Pippin in New York. He said, reminded me that you had played the famous "Close to You" solo for the Carpenters in 1970, and so that was clearly soon after you got here, and it became. I mean, it's such an identifiable. It was one of the most famous instrumental pop solos of all time, I would have to say. And people have said, since I've been doing a little homework about it, people have said that that kind of created an avalanche of people like, I want that guy, and that was the sound. And I don't know if that's true, and maybe you can address that, but maybe just tell us a little bit about, getting rolling in the studio scene, and then maybe how that solo played an important part of launching your recording career here in LA.
Okay, that's very true, Mike. That solo was done at A&M Records at Studio B, and when I moved here in '69, of course, I knew Ollie was doing. Ollie was doing all the rock and roll records, all of them. So I was on every date with him. I was doing like 3 a day. I did that for 20 years, and but it was just incredible, all the stuff that was being done. I'm talking about all the Motown stuff, all the bubblegum stuff you're talking about. But then the Carpenters came on the scene, and it was this brother and sister from Downey, California. And Jack Doherty, who produced them, was a piano player, trumpet player. He played in one of Woody's bands, one of the Herds. He played fourth trumpet. I never even heard him play trumpet because he played piano. But he was working at Northrop Aviation, and was doing solo piano stuff down in Palm Springs. Well, Herb Alpert's A&M Records was going, at that time, 1970, was going down, it was going under. And so Herb, the way Herb, you have to know him to understand this, but he thinks if the studio is 66 degrees and if fine wine is kept in a temperature of 66 degrees, if your studio is 66 degrees, then you make fine music. That's Herb's. No, I'm serious. And that's exactly what he did, too, one time. But, so he's looking for somebody to make A&M affluent again and have them put them back on the map. And he was down in Palm Springs and he heard this piano player. His name was Jack Doherty. And he found out, he researched him, found out that he worked at Northrop Aviation, I think it was Northrop, and found out that he was there for 3 years. And after 3 years that he's been there, they just thrived behind Jack. And they hated him there for the fact that this young man, he was offered a position, wonderful position there at the aviation place, over people that had much, much more seniority over him. But since he was the one, now Herb saw this and saw him play piano, so he knew he was a musician. He asked him if he wanted to be a producer at A&M Records, because he thought, well, okay, this guy over here. Well, he goes to A&M, and the first act that he has is the Carpenters. Joe Osborne, the bass player, brought this tape to Herb, and Herb listened to it, and it was completely different than everything was being done at A&M Records back then. I mean, the hippest thing was happening was Joni Mitchell, but I mean, as far as anything vocally like that, I mean, it was really rock and roll. The days of real rock and roll, not Karen Carpenter or Richard. And so Herb had this tape and gave it to Jack, who he just hired, and said, here, let's you produce them. Well, he takes the Carpenters, he brings them in, and Jack he liked, he was really into orchestrated things, and that was his whole thing. And he took them, and everybody looked at him as a real bubblegum act.
Sure.
There's no way in the world this is going to work. Well, Jack put that together. He hired the greatest musicians he could in this town and got them to record with it. And we put on the brass. And it was me and Ollie Mitchell, once again Ollie, and Buddy Childers, the three of us. So we were recording at A&M. And Buddy originally played the solo, Buddy Childers. Now, I knew Jack from doing some other things with Jack. And after we finished, Jack asked me to stay. And then I said, why? He said, well, I would like you to put the flugelhorn solo on this track. So I said, well, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I was a young kid. He said, no, I'd love you to do it. I said, okay, I'll do it. So I did it. And the hardest thing was the dipping the note on boop, 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 boop. Well, those positions, I mean, you know, especially a flugelhorn, there's no way you can, use the third valve, it's the second valve slide you can. So it was really hard to get under that F sharp, E concert, and F sharp. You know, it was very difficult to do. And I only recorded it. I didn't have to do these things live, but I've been told from many, many trumpet players that they sweat before they have to go to that because because it has to dip into it, you know. I only did it in 2 takes or something like that. But
I just got to say, I went back and listened to it after it, and it's like a harbinger of great Chuck Findley because it's there, but it's not. It doesn't beat you over the head with it. It's just like it's so tasteful, and it gives you everything you want, but it's not. It's just great, and it holds up so well after all these.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. But, getting back to what that did. Yes, it did. Because of that, and then once again, overnight, 24 hours later, Carpenters were an unbelievable, huge success. It was #1, and that record label just kind of, they're back on the map again. I mean, instantly. That's the way things happen. Also, as far as Carrot and Richard were concerned as well, they were 2 kids from Downey. All of a sudden now, like 24 hours later, they're like multimillionaires, and they're like, you know, it was almost too much for them actually, and I think that was a reason for Karen's demise, to be honest with you. See, it was just too much. There was, you know, they were on the road concerts all over the place, and you know how managers book, they were just too busy. I mean, I'd see them once in a while at A&M, and I'd say, Karen, you know, I said, are you going to be, you know, taking a little holiday? Are you going to be in town for a while? No, we leave tomorrow morning, you know, on the private plane. So they were constantly in and out, recording in and out on the road, so it was tough. But that... and A&M Records, no, they didn't like Jack Doherty at all because it was like a stab in their back, laughing in their face. Everybody there, everybody at A&M Records, every writer, everybody there said there's no way in the world this is going to happen. Jack did it, and Herb, first of all, Herb brings him in. Who is this guy? You know, plays solo piano down in Palm Springs. Who is this guy? You know, and the Carpenters come in, big hit overnight. A&M's back, and they should have been thrilled that now their job was secure.
Of course,
but they didn't like the fact that this guy got all the glory now again too. So it was a lot of shit.
Interesting.
That happened there. But that led for me, but Ollie Mitchell was the one that got me started. That helped a lot, trust me. But it was more Ollie getting me going in this town, and knowing people and records, but that's all always wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. You know, this just kind of jumping ahead a little bit. In 1979, I was a freshman at Eastman School of Music. My mom called me up and said, I've just read this amazing article about this guy, Chuck Findley. I'm going to send it to you because I think you'll like this. Of course, I knew who you were at that point, but I was like, great, Mom, send it. So I open the mail, have it, I read the article. Front page of the Wall Street Journal. There's your image in the newspaper kind of image back then. And it basically talks about, here's the blueprint of the most successful studio musician you can imagine. I cut the article out like it was the Bible. I mean, I was just so careful to make sure it didn't get, taped it up on my dorm room wall. It sat there for the whole time I was in that room. And it still amazes me that there was that, and it was so great. Like, it just doesn't happen nowadays. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that article, but also, obviously, that period in time, the late 70s, where it created that article, that you were doing so much stuff. So maybe just address what it was like in those years for you here in LA.
Okay, Mike. Well, it was interesting how it happened. Actually, of course, I was telling you, I was doing 3 record dates a day. I was ridiculous. Either record dates where I was doing some of the Warner Brothers or a film call. I was doing something. I was always doing like 3 things a day, and I was married to my lovely wife Celia then, and we had a '55 Oldsmobile that we had that I used to drive to work in. I loved this car. And I got a call from Max Herman, was the president of the union here, the musicians union here. And Max told me there's this gentleman that wants to do an article on you. And I want to say his name was Dan Stewart, but that wasn't it. I can't remember his name. And so I said, okay, fine. Because what he did is he went to the union, the musicians union. And the reason he went there to do this article is because his sister did a commercial, like some kind of commercial, like, I don't know if it was for makeup or some kind of commercial. And she didn't even have any speaking lines, but she got residual checks on this. And he couldn't believe that his sister was in this thing, and he didn't know anything about this, and she was getting residual checks. So he went to the musicians union and asked Max Herman who to do the article on, and Max told him me. So this guy wants to he wants to do an article on me. So I said, well, you have to be with me, all the time. So you have to follow me to every session. So now, mind you, I'm doing 3 a day, running from one date to another date to another date. So he's following me. I'm in the Olds. And so I have a 9 o'clock in the morning. He's there. Okay, we do the 9 o'clock, 9 to 12. Then I got a 2 o'clock, and we go overtime, so it's 9 to 1. And I have a 2 o'clock at Warner Brothers from flying. Now he's flying behind me in his car. And I'm, driving from session to session. I get to Warner Brothers. He's there at Warner Brothers. And the next one, I'm down at Motown at 9. And go till like 3 in the morning. Now I go home, and then next morning I tell him where to be. Next morning, I have another 9 o'clock. And he says, I don't get 5 hours sleep. He's there. So mind you, this happened for 1 week. Well, by the 3rd day, I'll never forget, we were at Warner Brothers. And then Gary, everybody knows this guy now. They know he's doing this article, he's following me around. We're in the little studio at Warner Brothers doing something, and he's in the studio. He's sitting in a chair like this, and I told Gary, I think Gary Grant was there. I said, Gary, I said, take a look at him. Look like this. Out, completely out. He just couldn't hang. He tried, but, and we had a little help back then as well, but, a lot of coffee. But it helped.
Coffee's a good thing.
Coffee got us through all those sessions.
It's a big help, yeah.
Yeah, but that's how that article happened. And because he, just wanted to know about residuals and stuff, and so that was it. It was beautiful, actually.
Yeah.
And I got a call from Johnny Rivers, who I had gone on the road with in 1971. And I hadn't talked to Johnny in like 7 years. And Johnny Rivers calls me and says, and he's a real businessman, Johnny Rivers, too. I mean, real business. Very wealthy investment. He's invested wisely. And he called me up and he says, I can't believe it. He says, you made the cover of the Wall Street Journal. He says, I can't make the Wall Street. He said, I don't know any musician who's ever been on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. I said, well, I am, Johnny. I said, I'm sorry. And I think the article read something like, musician makes fortune, not fame. I think that's what it said. I'm not sure, I think that's what it said. And back then I was making a lot of money. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was making more than the President of the United States. Back then. I was making over $150,000 in the 70s, early 70s. Mm-hmm. That was a lot of money back then.
Sure, absolutely.
Don't come anywhere near that these days. But, but I mean, in comparison, But it's, it was great. But everybody was. It wasn't just me. All the musicians were making a lot of money. We were getting big record checks as well. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the music. Yeah. There were always 3 trumpets, always 3 and 4 trumpets on every date. Yeah. Except for some of the rock and roll dates, it was like that's when we started double tracking with me and Jim Horn, and Slide, Lou McCreary, or even if it were 2 trumpets, it'd be me and Ollie, it'd be Lou McCreary and Slide Hine. It would be Jim Horn and Plas Johnson, or something like that, and then we'd double track, and they just loved that, and they didn't care. Back then there was so much money for the budget, they could care less. It was just whatever you wanted. Amazing stuff.
I had the pleasure of meeting you for the first time in 1983. I was on Buddy's band. We were in LA. A friend of mine said, I got an invite to go hear Chuck Findley and Jerry Hay tomorrow. Do you want to come along? I was like, absolutely. So we went down, and I can't remember if it was at Ocean Way or what studio it was at, and it was for the Manhattan Transfer. And I was keenly aware of Jerry Hay and you guys in this section that was existing, and this was just fantastic. And we walked in, and I got to meet you, and I have to say, hearing you guys that day, it changed my life as a musician and as a brass player. I'd never heard anything like it, and it feels like I've never heard anything like it since. And it was the most powerful sound, and at the same time, the most focused and in tune and in time sound from a section that I've ever heard. And for all of you who know Chuck's work with Jerry, for me, it's the greatest section of all time. Just the combination of those 3 trumpets with Bill Reichenbach and Charlie Loper, and just the sound of the brass, and then Jerry's writing and everything. That was just a moment in time. It's amazing. Maybe could you just talk a little bit about your relationship with Jerry, and then also maybe a couple other members of the section, in particular your relationship with Gary and with the great Bill Reichenbach, one of my all-time favorite trombone players.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
Bill's brilliant. I knew Gary before Jerry, of course. I met, when I was in Buddy's band, I met Gary. He was in the Navy down in San Diego. And we worked, she was on the band myself. This was the summer of '67. And we went down, we were at some club down there in San Diego, and Gary showed up, and he was in his Navy, well, he wasn't in his uniform, but he and his wife, his fiancée there, Lynetta, and they came in, and he said, I'm a trumpet player, my name's Gary Grant, blah, blah, blah. So we meet Gary, and the first thing that Shu does is we go to the bar, well, Gary, we're going to buy you a drink. So first thing we're doing is we're on the break, and Gary's knocked out. He can't believe he's listening to Buddy's band. He was just, and I never heard him play yet. And so Shu buys us tequila, shots of tequila. So we're drinking and beer chasers, Boilermakers. And so now we go up to play the second set. And Gary told me later on, I found out later, he said, I couldn't believe it. He said, I could hardly move. And you guys went up and did another set with Buddy's band. He said it was just frightening. So that's when I met Gary. So then Gary moved here after he went to North Texas State as well. And that was 67. I moved here in 69. Gary moved here probably 70. I'm thinking he was out of the Navy, and he went to North Texas prior to that, I think. He did a stint at North Texas, then it was the Navy, and then he moved here. And he was living in Eagle Rock, and I was living in Silver Lake. And Ollie had already gotten me in, so I was busy as can be. But so busy, I needed subs. And I needed people that I could call and that could come in and do my gig and make sure that it was covered. Mm-hmm. Well, Gary was the guy. Gary was fantastic. And but I couldn't reach him because his brother ran up his phone bill so high that he didn't have a phone. So the only way I could get Gary was to send a messenger to his house. And I mean, think about it, because back in those days, you had actual landlines. You had to pull over to a phone booth to call somebody, and I couldn't get him. I couldn't reach him. So he got an invitation to go to Hawaii from a guy by the name of Harvey Ragsdale, who was the contractor in Hawaii. So Gary went to Hawaii, and he was like, Harvey sent him out a penthouse, he and Lynetta. And they had a little girl, Mary Kay, at the time, and Patrick, their little boy. So they had two little kids. And it was perfect for them, and right at the time. Obviously, timing wasn't right for him. So I went over there. But Gary missed us and missed me and missed everybody here in LA so much that he would have us come over. He'd have Harvey fly us over for a week and play a show with him. So he could hang out with us. So we knew Gary wanted to come back. So anyhow, Gary came back in like 74. But when I was over there, I met Jerry. And all the guys I met, the Seawind, I met Jerry, I met Kim Hutchcroft, I met Larry Williams, Bob Williams, everybody in that band. It was just an incredible band. When I heard them live, to this day, I still think it was the finest group that I ever heard. They were just phenomenal. Wow. So clean and so tight. And Pauline Wilson, Bob Wilson, and Williams. Fantastic. And then Harvey Mason brought him over to produce them too, because he heard them over there. So Jerry comes to town too. So I had Gary, and then I had Jerry. Now, Gary came first, and I got Gary working now. Now I could reach him, and he was doing all kinds of sessions with me, and he was getting real busy. And then Jerry moves over, and so it was perfect. I needed something. I needed players that I could call and say, please, I can't make it to 2 o'clock at Motown. Could you do it for me? Can you get over there? Can you go here? Can you go here? Can you go here? So I was great. For me, it was fantastic. We needed players, and I needed players that I could, those kind of players, because of the things I did. I needed some really, really top-notch players that I could count on playing a fade for a 5-minute fade on high F's and G's and not missing a note. I needed something like that. And I had Gary, and then I had Jerry. So it was wonderful. For me, it was like heaven that I had these guys, and it was like this. And that's why we play so well together. I mean, we think the same, we play the same. It's incredible. And then of course Bill comes, and here's this young trombone player that's brilliant tenor trombone player. He was playing tenor, and fantastic. And then I got him with Menza. Originally it was me and Don Menza and Yo-Yo, Frank Rossellino. That was the sextet we had. And then Yo-Yo's girlfriend Diane told him that he was too good for the group, so he left. And I said, Don, we got to get Bill. He's the best guy for it. So we got Bill in there. So we did all kinds of gigs as a sextet together, and it was beautiful. So we'd be in the studios all day, and at night at Dante's we'd be playing with the sextet or wherever, Carmelo's, all over the place. It was fantastic. Bill was beautiful. So that was my, with those guys, and we've been working together ever since.
Yeah, that's amazing. You guys have done so much incredible work together.